This is Made in America with Neil Asbury and Rich Rothman.
A very, very big welcome to you today. Folks, we're really, really happy that you're with us from all over this great country of ours. We really, really appreciate our listeners. Without you, there would be no Made in America, and Dr. Rich and I would lose this incredible opportunity to speak to some really, really fascinating people who are really making a difference in our country. And each week we get to have these conversations with you and them, a very important part of the national dialogue that we feel that we're bringing to you, things that just are not talked about very much in this gotcha sort of culture that we have. You know, we just want to get down to the issues that really matter. And Rich, I mean, we got an incredible guest. He's been with us before. Our first guest today, Steve Forbes. He's written a book, very important book, Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. And just like in my business, I always like people to tell me what the problem is, but I want them to tell me how to fix it. What's the solution? So Steve has done that. We're very pleased to have him back with us right now. Steve Forbes, who's the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. Steve, welcome back to Made in America.
Well, good to be with you. Thank you.
Well, inflation, I mean, that is really what's going on now. And now we see, the GDP shrinking. We see interest rates going up. And a lot of that is driven by inflation. So you wrote the book, Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. Why did you write the book?
Well, a year ago when we started, I've got two co-authors. We saw that the Federal Reserve was continuing to misbehave. Even after COVID started to calm down, the economy started to recover. They were still on a big money printing binge. And so we didn't like that. And then Washington, normally after something like a disaster like COVID, you'd think they'd let the economy heal, which it would if they left it alone. Instead, they went in the opposite direction and went war against oil and gas, put in new regulations. Just the other day, the president says, I'm for infrastructure. Yet his White House puts out rules that are going to make new projects even more difficult, take even more years to do it. So we saw these trends. We decided better write a short, reader-friendly book that makes the case what it is, but it's also something that government can cure.
So, Rich, I mean, that's the issue. The government can cure it.
Well, the government can cure it if the government wants to cure it. I mean, that's the problem. I think here's the significance as I see it. This book couldn't be any more timely than it is right now. Just recently, in the last few days of polling, inflation went to the number one concern going into the midterms. As of right now, the number one concern is inflation to the average American. Why? Because it's agnostic, because it affects everybody. Doesn't matter whether you're wealthy, doesn't matter whether you're poor or you're middle class. It will hurt the poor and the middle class more than anyone else. But it is the number one major concern. So what we really need, and what I think Steve has really done a great job with, is giving us, sort of when I was a kid, we had a triptych, and we took a trip with the family across the country. What Stephen has provided us in this new book is, the GPS and how to get out of this. What are we going to do? How are we going to survive? Why is it bad? If you understand what the problem is, maybe you can bring forth some brilliant ideas. So, Stephen, kudos on what you're doing, and I think this is very important for us right now.
So how do we fix it, Steve?
The way you fix it is on the government side, we make the point there are two kinds of inflation, monetary and non-monetary. On the non-monetary side, you do things like stop beating the economy with regulations, stop waging war on energy. So do the opposite of what Biden is doing now. On the monetary side, the Fed should stop printing the money, start reducing the money supply, stop manipulating interest rates. They shouldn't be controlling interest rates. Let borrower and lender decide that. And ultimately, this gets to be controversial, and it's not going to happen overnight, so to speak. But ultimately, you'll get the dollar tied to a gold standard. back in the 90s, late 80s and the 90s, early 90s, Greenspan, Alan Greenspan, who was chairman of the Federal Reserve, actually informally, sloppily tied the dollar to gold. And it worked. It's called the Great Moderation. So let's go with what works. But short term, stop harming the patients.
So, Steve, I'd like to get your idea on this because Senator Schumer, he had an idea about how to stop inflation. Let's listen to the senator.
If you want to get rid of inflation, the only way to do it is to undo a lot of the Trump tax cuts and raise rates. No Republican is ever going to do that. So the only way to get rid of inflation is through reconciliation.
Now, wait a second. So the solution is to raise taxes. Just want to think about that, Steve.
Right. Hurt the economy.
Somehow.
It worked so well in the 1970s. Make for less economic activity. That's how you help inflation. Throw people out of work. Don't expand businesses. It's very strange, but that's why the Democrats, I think, are going to take a shellacking this November.
So, Rich, I mean, jump in there.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think Steve is 100% correct. I mean, it is coming down the pike right now, and I think that is why the Democrats are getting so nervous because they see this happening. And the one thing for the first quarter numbers to come out as they did this week and be so bad, so awful bad, that this just gives more egregious lack of benefit to the Democratic Party and this president. And, every time we think his polling numbers can't go any lower, I think they will go lower, given that more and more people are going to be hurt. We had the Harvard professor talk to us, and the former economic head of chief economist for the IMF, make a comment about that just this week. Let's listen to number 14 and get Steve's opinion on this.
It's a preliminary number. I was expecting a low number, but it's shocking. I really don't want to say it's, even below the worst that I thought it might be. 8.5% inflation, more than minus 1% GDP growth, not a very good quarter.
So, Steve, I mean, how does
Stephen, this sounds like a disaster, the perfect storm.
Well, when you have people like Larry Summers, who worked for Clinton, Treasury Secretary, and then an advisor to Barack Obama, warn about inflation, and others the Democrats are. Schumer, I think, is whistling past the graveyard, doesn't really describe it. I don't know what he's inhaling. The idea that you depress the economy, and that's good. I won't go any further about inflicting pain being good for you. But anyway, I think you're setting up an environment where you can get real change, starting with these November elections. We're like where we were in the late 1970s when things looked terrible. So you got the California tax uprising in the late 70s. You got the first reduction in capital gains tax. You got the election of Ronald Reagan. And guess what? The dollar was stabilized. Tax rates were cut, deregulation, and the economy took off like an Elon Musk rocket. How's that?
Well, let me.
He is my hero. I have to tell you that he is my contemporary hero right now. I think the guy's amazing, just an amazing individual. Had to get that out there.
Let's say, we'll talk about that here in a moment because that is a good topic. But one thing, just before we have to go to a break, very quickly. I mean, you ran for president, Steve. I mean, you know what that's like, and in the polls, and in the mood of the country, and your finger on the pulse, and all of that. I mean, how bad do you think it is for this White House right now?
It is very bad, and they don't help themselves by telling such whoppers as, "Oh, this is all the fault of Vladimir Putin," as if this guy is such a Superman Svengali that he can upend the American economy. He can't wage a war, but by golly, he can wreck America. People know things were in trouble before he invaded Ukraine. But that kind of thing undermines the credibility of the White House, and they're going to pay a political price. And one of the things we point out in the book is when you get inflation, they always look for scapegoats. Back in Roman times, it was the Christians. In medieval times, they pointed fingers at the witches. With Nixon in the 1970s, that terrible inflation, he blamed on greedy Arabs. Today, it's oil company executives, food producers, Vladimir Putin, who knows who else.
Yeah, so it just keeps going on, and but hey, Steve, we still got a lot more to talk about. To follow up on Dr. Rich's point, and we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back. But folks, when we do, we're going to talk with Steve about Elon Musk and what he is doing, and what he is doing for the American economy and American just the whole dialogue. And we see what's happening with our companies and politics and culture, and everything is kind of merging together. The voice of conservatives have been kept down. It's an unfair playing field. Is that going to change? We're going to talk to Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, just in a second. He's going to stay with us for this. You don't want to miss it. Very, very big welcome. We're pleased that you're with us today. We hope that you stay with us. I got to tell you, man, we got a wonderful show. We just heard from Steve Forbes. He's still with us. We got him for a few more minutes, so you don't want to miss it. Stick with us. Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media, having a great discussion. He is also the author of Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It, with co-authors Nathan Lewis and Elizabeth Ames. So, Steve, we talked a little bit about it just a moment ago, about Elon Musk and, how he's kind of like reinventing American business. I mean, not just, in a small way, but in a very, very fundamental way. And now, the town square and changing the national dialogue. I mean, how important is that for our country and for our economy?
Well, a couple of things on him. One is he is an extraordinary entrepreneur. What he's done with electronic vehicles is remarkable. From a standing start, that company today has about $65–70 billion in sales. But even more impressive is that he makes his technology, he makes a better vehicle, EV vehicle, electronic vehicle, than the American auto industry, the Germans, the Chinese, the Koreans, the Japanese. He did better than all of them. And you see the same thing in rocketry. His rocketry technology is better than NASA's, thankfully better than China's. So he's not just an entrepreneur. He's done some extraordinary things.
He is an amazing individual in the sense that he can envision something, and then he knows how to bring it to market in a way that you just described, a remarkable way. I mean, what he did with his rocket, which I find to be astounding when I look at the folks who are running the rockets when they're having a launch. My God, the median age must be about 29. I mean, they're very, very young people, very, very smart people. He was able to accomplish what NASA couldn't do in 35 years, and that is take a rocket and have it re-land. So you have a reusable rocket, and you lower the cost. He's just a brilliant man. So he defines everything when you look for an entrepreneur in this modern society, the 21st century society. He is a physical manifestation of that. I'm delighted that he's here and doing this.
So,
Yes,
Steve, Steve, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just saying, opening up the public square, that's good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to be really fascinating to watch. But, now that he's opening up the public square, Steve, you've got the progressives who are really coming after this guy. Now, think about the irony of this. What's their pet project, the thing they care about most? It's climate and climate change and the green economy. Elon Musk has done more because of the success he's had with electric vehicles, to participate and help in the green economy. He should be their poster boy. I mean, he's done more for the green economy than anybody else in the world has, and yet right now they're just relentlessly beating this guy up. And I doubt they're going to stop because of what he's doing now with Twitter. Free speech. Imagine that, free speech.
Yeah, open debate. Yep.
and then give people access to the algorithms and look at all the stuff that's happening inside that company right now. I mean, they're running around the ship is going down and they're scared. They're scared like, wow, this guy's he's going to reveal all this stuff that we've been doing to the Republican presidential candidate. You ran for president. Just think about, the tool that the Democrats had against the Republicans, and it looks like that might be going away now.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to have, Jefferson talked about it, you're supposed to have a freewheeling debate. And now we're going to get it, and certain people aren't very happy with that.
So,
well, evidently Biden isn't, because he's going to have the Disinformation Governance Board that he announced this week. It seems coincidental that he announced that, right after Musk takes over Twitter. Oh, my God. This is going to be a very interesting thing going forward. Neil?
Hey, Steve, the Feds, are going to meet, and they're talking about interest rates, right? And they're going to maybe raise it by, 50 basis points they're talking about. It's the biggest increase in interest rates that's been for like many, 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 many years. So it's going to be a really big deal if they do that, and it looks like they are going to do it. But is interest rates the key to stopping inflation? I mean, is it going to work what they're trying to do, and how much do they have to increase interest rates to have an impact?
Well, the answer to your question is no, it's not the way you do it. The way you do it, as we point out in the book, is to stabilize the value of the dollar. And it's not trying to raise interest rates artificially. And what they're doing is they're creating a slower economy. They think that the way you cure inflation is by depressing the economy. And it's a bogus theory. But unfortunately, they seem wedded to it, and so that's why there's storm clouds out there. The markets are all over the place because they don't know quite what's going to be happening. And unfortunately, the Fed is like a doctor, guilty of malpractice, and they're continuing to violate, as we chatted about earlier, stop harming the patients.
Oh, my goodness, Steve, I wanted to get a question out, but I can't. Our producer says we're out of time, but we really, really appreciate you being with us. We always enjoy you. You're an incredible man, a great American. We really appreciate what you do. Steve Forbes, the great American, author of Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. He's also the chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. Steve, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, we have Alan Davis, who is the president and CEO of I-5 Services, who's helping American manufacturers, or people who want to come back home, or people here who need the help with their supply chains. Very, very important discussion. Stay with us.
Promoting American industry. This is Made in America with Neil Asbury and Rich Rothman.
A very big welcome back. We're glad you're with us. For any new listeners, thanks for joining us. We're really having a great show today. Lots of very, very important topics. And supply chain continues to be in the news. We see that the U.S. economy shrunk in Q1 by 1.4%. I mean, that's really amazing. That's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of hurt in that number, and people are feeling it, both consumers as well as people out in the workforce, obviously with inflation. But the supply chain isn't getting any better. And should we really be thinking about reshoring, onshoring, bringing our jobs back?
Nearshoring, if you have to.
Nearshoring, yes, instead of Asia, considering our backyard here in Latin America, right? And maybe that's helping with our immigration problems, because hey, look, that's a bomb that's ready to go off right now on our southern border.
We should put a big sign up at the border. Turn around. We're going to be building. Go home. Go home. You have a great opportunity if you go home. I'm sure Biden would love that.
Right. Well, that's not going to happen. But a judge did stop, at least his plan of just absolutely opening up the border. And I don't know how long that stays in place. But boy, what a mess do we have going down there. But if we did bring back our jobs to America or into the neighborhood, that would create a lot of opportunity for our own people and for our own region. And I think that's a good thing. So Alan Davis is joining us now. He's the president and CEO of iServices. They've created a database of U.S. manufacturers to help them find other U.S. manufacturers or bringing U.S. manufacturers back to our country to bring our jobs back, but also to help with the supply chain issues, right? I mean, if you're an American company and you have your supply chain in Asia right now and you're trying to get components and things and materials and you can't for a variety of reasons, just so many different reasons preventing that from happening, and Alan is helping folks. And he's joining us right now. Alan, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
So, Alan, I'm an American manufacturer, and I got to tell you, I'm one of these people that's really hung up right now in Asia. We get a lot of motors, we get a lot of materials. For years and years, American companies developed their supply chains around the world, and a lot of them in Asia. And, we hit a wall. I mean, we just absolutely hit a wall, and things are really, really tough right now. And we see it in the Q1 numbers of the U.S. economy shrinking. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so for about the last 10 years, we have been working to help manufacturers source local first. It started off as an economic development initiative to try to help improve the manufacturing sector. Actually, in the state of Utah is where it started. And it was effective. And as we helped manufacturers look and search and find other manufacturers based upon what they do, not just what they produce. So meaning looking for capabilities, equipment and materials and processes and those kinds of things, so they could find other manufacturers to source from local first before they started to look outside the country and other places.
I mean, that's Rich. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, that's what we're all about here at Made in America, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you can make the connection, half the problem is trying to figure out who to go to, where to go to. So if you can make that as seamless as possible, it's a very necessary service for people. Because particularly right now, I mean, with the supply chain situation being so bad in my industry, it's devastating at this moment. Just devastating. I'm in publishing. I print magazines every month. Paper never used to be a super problem as it. Bottom line is you can't get paper. You cannot get paper. The only way to get paper is to get out there in the marketplace through your printer. I don't do that. The printer does it. And they have to buy it on the spot market. And it's horrible right now. And it is probably one of the most devastating moments in the last 10 years for the publishing industry. So if you're able to work with people who are producing product closer to where you are and not have to deal with the many weeks on the seas being shipped and so forth, it saves money, it saves time, and it really facilitates your corporation to survive what's going on with the supply chain and then move forward.
Yeah,
Rich,
an amazing.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Sorry.
No,
well,
go right ahead.
I was going to say a really amazing thing is when we started this, it was shocking when we helped some large manufacturers find some local resources. When they would come back to us and tell us, first off, that they couldn't, all their buyers had searched, they couldn't find anyone locally. We would run a search and we would find a supplier, and oftentimes it was less than a mile or two from their facility. They just didn't know they existed. And so it was a massive problem in our country where we couldn't really find our own capabilities. And, it's been exacerbated during the pandemic as we started looking for new sources for producing masks and PPE, all those kinds of things, and not knowing where the capabilities were or how to get connected to them was one of the largest challenges we had. It wasn't that we didn't have capability or that we were totally incapable of doing it. It was that we couldn't find where those capabilities were and we couldn't coordinate it.
So, Alan, let's listen to it. Supply chain problems, lockdowns, and lockdowns in China. I mean, that's a really big issue. Hey, they're having COVID over there, and the country hasn't gone through what we did. Fortunately, we're at the other end of it right now. We have a great vaccine. That vaccine has really worked, unlike the China vaccine, which doesn't work. And now they're going through these lockdowns, and think of what that's doing to supply chains. Let's listen to William LaJeunesse from Fox News. He had this to say recently.
Global supply chains are really resilient But when something happens, there will be ripple effects.
And right now that begins in China. Some 44 cities in COVID lockdown, manufacturing at a standstill, hundreds of container ships waiting to dock. Others can't leave.
There is a huge backlog now that's kind of building up because nothing is flowing out, and it's quite impossible actually to move anything to another port.
That means finished products like furniture and appliances. Components like computer chips and tires remain bottled up.
So, Alan, I mean, we talk a lot about China and supply chains, but and everything we import from China, I don't think a lot of folks realize that over 50% of what we import from China is actually materials and components that goes into American-made products. So this isn't just not getting your finished good. This is American factories can't operate.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that ripple effect that he talks about is something that is impacting all kinds of products. I remember, early someone complaining and telling me they couldn't get Fleischmann's yeast. They said, we know Fleischmann's yeast is produced here in the U.S. But my question back to them was, are all the ingredients that go into Fleischmann's yeast actually being sourced in the U.S.? And the answer was no. And so it is a matter of being able to find other sources than what we've depended upon and relied upon from overseas for so long. And making all those corrections is not something that happens overnight, by the way. It will take us some time. But we know that having been in this for a number of years now, just what that challenge is like, and we're seeing success. So it should give us some measure of hope as we start seeing these incredible stories of success as we begin to connect our manufacturing supply chain together within the U.S., and we start to see the gaps, right? And if we can understand and see the gaps, we're amazing at being able to adapt and respond in the U.S. if we can actually see the problem and be able to put our arms around it, figure out what to do about it.
Well, Alan, that's great point. We need visibility, and that's what you're providing. Alan Davis is the president and CEO of iServices. You're doing a really great job and a very important work, Alan. Keep it up. We really need this to happen. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Coming up, Dr. Rich and I still have a lot to cover. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're together with Dr. Rich and myself, Neil Asbury here, your hosts, leading a discussion on topics and situations and issues that are just so important to our life. Hey, Rich, there's nothing more important than food. And we see how fragile the situation is with the Ukraine and Russia and wheat and corn. So much of it, for maybe not for the United States, but for other countries around the world, are coming from there. And America's food security, with the Green New Deal and the Green Agenda and what Biden is doing with that, together with what's happening in Russia, I mean, the world's food security and even the U.S. food security right now is at risk, Rich.
Well, yeah, it is a very, very tentative environment to be in right now. And I don't think we really understand that. You see, we're used to having so much. We produce so much. We produce so much food. Well, we produced so much food that we would be the world's exporter for so much of our wheat and other products that we have here. Wonderful thing that we can do. We have brilliant, wonderful farmers. We have a hardworking, mid-America that produces the food for us. California, in spite of all its, economic disasters as a result of poor leadership on the political side, is also the breadbasket of the United States. I mean, they just outgrow everybody. And but what we're not understanding yet, but we will by this summer, by this fall harvest, is that Europe doesn't necessarily, each of the countries don't produce the food that they need to feed their people. And they get it from someplace else. And those words, someplace else, really define the problem that's coming down the pike, so to speak. And that is, come harvest time, there may not be enough food for everyone. There may be lack of food in many countries overseas, and maybe for the first time in the United States, there may be a shortage, and there's a difference, shortage of food in the United States. And I got to tell you, you don't feed people. You go into a really bad place. Neil. Don't you agree? I mean, that's a dangerous place to be because people do, frightening things when they are hungry.
Well, exactly, and let's listen. There's two clips that came out this week that I think really sum this up. One is from Tucker Carlson on Fox, and it's a fourth-generation farmer that rejects President Biden's green agenda. Let's first listen to that, and then after we're going to listen to the CEO of Goya Foods. But let's listen first to this farmer here in America, fourth-generation farmer. She knows what's going on.
How could you ignore your own country's food, water, and energy supplies? That's the basis of everything, or am I missing something?
No, I don't think you're missing anything at all. I think this administration has made it very clear that the Green New Deal and climate change and billions of dollars running through Washington, D.C. is their agenda, and they could care less about the American people, our food supply, and our food security. I've always said no farms, no food, no future. And
food is not only incredibly necessary for peace and stability, security and prosperity, but it provides a lot of jobs, too. A very important part of our economy. Now, Rich, we're going to listen to the CEO of Goya Foods talking about the global food crisis that he feels is coming up. Then I'd like to get your thoughts on this.
Joining me right now is the president and CEO of Goya Foods, Bob Unanue. Bob, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Assess the situation. How do you see inflation today?
Good to see you, Maria. We are on the precipice of a global food crisis. With 30% of the world's wheat production, if that goes unplanted in the Ukraine and corn and other things, that our world is very it's a very tight balance. And if we interrupt the food production, we will have a food crisis. Prices will go through the roof. We can afford it as a rich country. We're so abundant. But other countries, unfortunately, will not. And we will be the last ones affected. But like Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake.
So, Rich, we got about 20 seconds left. Let them eat cake. What a soundbite. Just your final thoughts on this.
Well, no, I think it's a very, very bad place that we could be. And I agree, and we've had other sound bites on this, but come time when this harvest comes in, a couple of things will hit. One, it's going to be much more expensive because the fuel for the farmers to maintain their machinery and use it is like 2 to 3 times what they would normally pay. And at the same time, they don't have the hydrocarbon-based nitrogen fertilizer that will make it that much more rich in terms of the quality. So I think America is going to be into a rude awakening. I'm listening. These folks are the Nostradamus of food coming down the pike.
Hey, Rich, we gotta end it there, but we're going to be back here just in a moment. We still got a lot more to talk about, very important topics. Stay with it. It's been a wonderful show, and we're really happy that you're with us today. Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, and I am together with my great friend and partner, Dr. Rich Rothman. Rich, I don't know how many shows we've done, but it's in the hundreds. I don't know. Do you think we've hit 1,000 shows together? We've been doing a lot of shows for a long time.
14 years, Neil, if not 14 years, now that I think about it. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
Since the mid-2000s we started. And
we're still standing. Hey, how many shows in media, of any sort of media, last for 14 years? It's got to be a small percentage overall. So somehow, Rich, us a couple of old guys here have stood the test of time. We're still going strong.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun doing it. And you know what? We did it. We started doing this because it was the right thing to do. We both enjoyed it. And I think that's important.
That's important.
And it just grew organically.
Yeah.
And then we got Radio America, and we wound up all over the United States and in Armed Force Radio. And who knows, maybe we're being played, in Poland. We probably are on the military bases, now that I think about that.
And the U.S. Embassy. So, hey.
We have to do a segment on pierogies.
So, maybe we got to do in Alaska? We got to do a segment on salmon because the next segment is about Alaska. And,
right.
and our great friend, and the reason why we've lasted so long is because we've had incredible guests. I really believe that. And we're going to listen to a soundbite by Governor of Alaska, good friend of ours, been on our show, Governor Mike Dunleavy. And, he's up there. I mean, he's fighting a good fight. Alaska could be doing so much more for us, for energy, for rare earths, and many things that we need for our economy. But the governor has said that he's shackled. He wants to do it. He wants to help. They can do their part. Alaska could do so much more for our country to help relieve the pain that everyday Americans are feeling right now. But Washington won't let them do it. Let's listen to the governor.
It just keeps getting worse when it comes to producing energy in this country. Again, as you know, we're sending oil over to Europe out of our SPR. And here in Alaska, we have millions of acres of land. We have billions of barrels of oil. We have a pipeline that's a quarter full, so we have the ability to transport oil down to the West Coast and to our allies. And the Biden administration here yesterday just announced that NPR, the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska, about 8 million acres of that is now going to be taken off the table for exploration and potential development. And so it doesn't get any better. It just keeps getting worse. And we're still scratching our head as to where these ideas and where this policy is coming from.
Well, Rich, that's the governor. And what I want to say is this, is that we have other governors like Governor Dunleavy in our energy states who's ready to chip in and really take care of this thing once and for all, not only for us, but our allies, and really tackle this inflation thing. Even liberal Canada is ready to chip in and ship tons of oil, through pipelines down to the Gulf Coast. Liberal green Canada, Trudeau, the poster child of green and progressivism, is ready to jump in and help America with its energy in Canada, right? But not this administration. They just won't listen to it. They just won't allow it to happen. The thing that we need, they won't allow the solution. Rich.
No, they can't do it. Biden has completely sold out to become the president. He sold out to Bernie Sanders. He sold out by doing that to the extreme far left, AOC, the Squad, and all those other crazies that are there. And he's allowed basically a clown car run this government. And it's not just the energy situation. The energy is really, ironically, the driving force of everything else that's occurred, except for the border. And the border's another total disaster that they created. We'll talk about that later. But in terms of the energy situation, everyone knows what the answer is. The answer is open up full energy supplies in the United States. The world, if you think about this, when we went to World War II, we entered the war, reluctantly, by the way. We all know that because we were attacked. But when we entered the war, we went to a war-footing economy. I mean, I thought this president wants to be another FDR. Well, if he wants to be another FDR, then FDR worked with the Kaiser Industry Group, and they knocked out a ship every 24 hours. If you remember that, go back and study your history. And you'll see that we completely turned around the manufacturing of the United States to provide the product that we needed and the world needed. Remember that word. The world needed it to get and to get the products and win the war. There was no option of settling. There was never this option of, well, maybe we'll just, have a truce. It wasn't that way. We had to win, and we did what we had to do. This government, this administration will not do it, and that's the frustrating thing, and that's why we have problems in the world right now.
We're out of time, Rich, but hey, don't be sad, because we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.